Who's your favorite billionaire pretend astronaut? Can you believe there's a choice? And it's not between just two. We live in a day when billionaires are building their own rockets to fly to outer space, and no one's saying, are you sure they're paying all their taxes? Because I know some teachers that need supplies.
Welcome to Money Unplugged. I'm Chris Hill. Thanks for being here. We're just a few weeks away from Money Unplugged's first birthday, which is, honestly, it's a little hard to believe. And as I said recently, I'm excited about how things are lining up because later this month I'll have conversations with investor Cullen Roche and best-selling author Carl Richards. But today on the show I talk with Nick Wolny. He's a financial columnist and author of the brand new book, Money Proud. And I did not know him before this conversation. This is one of those situations where a publicist sent me a pitch because this is a show where money is the central topic, and this guy just wrote a book about money. And honestly, I responded to the publicist by basically saying, look, I don't know, but send me a copy of the book. I'll take a look at it, but I'm not promising anything. So she did, and I read the first page, and I was floored. And I wrote back to the publicist and said, I'm in. Let's find a time to talk. And we had a great conversation. Before the interview started, Nick and I talked about the process of narrating audiobooks because he recorded his own, and I've done that a few times, and I felt like we bonded a little bit over what that process is like. That comes up towards the end of the episode, but early in the conversation, I brought up the first page of his book and why it blew my mind. So let's get into it with Nick Wolny. Do you have an early memory of money?
One of my earliest memories of money is actually my parents fighting about it. So my parents got divorced when I was 7. I was like, that's an age where you don't really get what it is at first. And so I went and bragged to everyone in second grade that my parents were getting divorced, They'd be like, ooh la la, it's, not so clearly it didn't land very clearly, but learning that money, for a lot of people, money was a really big factor in why they ended up getting divorced. And so I would just, my dad was the saver. He was self-employed. He was a carpenter and he did wood flooring. So I have when he would take me for the weekends, he would sometimes take me on job sites or things like that. And so I have this random niche skill set. If you need me to lay a parquet floor after this, Chris, I can do it for you.
Fantastic.
It's a 2-for-1 deal. Yeah. And so so he was, a little bit more of that, self-employed and just entrepreneur, but more just one man show kind of thing. Hard labor, blue collar. And then my mom was more of the spender, and, he'd make a budget and then she'd just spend, as she saw fit and things like that. She was home with the kids. So probably a classic tale of money tension in a family dynamic. That was just one of the first things that came to mind consistently about money. And also that, that we didn't have much of it. It was always a point of tension. And so I found that I kind of wanted to steer clear from it, of thinking about it and, a lot of that for a long time.
Oh, yeah. And it's something that's come up a bunch of times on this show, just the anxiety that comes with money. And certainly it's something that comes up between couples if they're not in sync about how they want to spend together, how they want to save together, and all that sort of thing. Did you, other than helping out your dad, what was the first job you had when you were a kid?
Well, I didn't like helping him out. It was more of I need to stop by at this job while I have you for the weekend.
Oh, yeah. No, I'm sure from your dad's standpoint, it's great, I have an extra set of hands.
Yeah, exactly. I was not on track to become America's Next top wood flooring specialist. Let's say that. So I got a job as a paperboy. Now I was maybe like 9 or 10. And I was like, this is cool. I can ride my bike around the neighborhood and get paid to do it, and learn how to balance 50 pounds of rolled up paper on my handlebars, which all Midwest kids should develop as a skill. And I think what I liked about that job, or I think something that job taught me, was just kind of the independence and the self-direction that comes with having a paperboy route. The truck drops off the newspapers at your doorstep, 150 newspapers at 2:00 in the afternoon, and you get home I'd walk home from school, and there are the newspapers. And so I got to put my backpack down. I have to immediately unpack and roll up all those newspapers, load them up into my my little MacGyvered bike setup, and then go and do the route right then and there, because all the newspapers had to be delivered by 5 p.m. And so it was the time compression of that, and the need to organize my feelings in the moment, and to be like, okay, this job is actually it actually has to be done now in this order and by this time. And to also have that, it's almost played nicely into working remotely now, because it's like, okay, I'm home, but I have to do this thing, and I have to do it now. It's not an option to do it later. Yeah. And so, I had that route. I only had it for about a year and a half. Yeah. I think it really kind of just set the tone. And I think I'm a little bit of a loner. I think it's why I like being a writer. I just kind of like being in my groove and doing my thing. So it was a great first job.
I hadn't really thought about the amount of personal responsibility that comes with being a paperboy. But when you lay it out like that, and the fact that you're 10 years old, there's a pretty healthy leap of faith on the part of the newspaper to be like, well, we're going to drop these off, and hopefully this army of 10 to 12-year-old kids is just going to do what they do.
Right. And I think it's, I was fortunate that this was in, the 90s, and where newspapers were still much more of a thing. Like, people expected the newspaper at their doorstep when they got home from work, and that's how they were going to learn about what happened in the world that day, or what happened in town that day, which I think is something that's probably been lost since then, since just the rise of digital media and whatnot. But yeah, to think about it in retrospect, to be like, oh boy, a lot of this workforce, I was like, were they following the child labor laws at the time when they hired me? It's obviously they must have been, because it's so mainstream.
Carve out.
Yeah, I think it was cool to just, have an activity, and also to do something that made money, and to see the results of that. I think that was just a cool lesson that I wish and hope more young people can learn at an early age, because I think it just kind of creates that personal responsibility piece for you.
Let's go to college, because you went to the University of Illinois. Were you on a scholarship? You were studying music, right?
That's right. Yep.
French horn?
Yes, classical French horn. I actually have 2 degrees in classical French horn. One was not enough. So I went and got a master's. I also graduated in 2009, which was not the best year to graduate college, with the recession and whatnot. And my book is about personal finance for queer people. And one aspect of me going to college is, I wanted to get away from my kind of rural hometown, and I wanted to come out as a gay man, and I saw college as like a really cut and dry opportunity to do that. I was also interested in music. I think for me in school, I got good grades and I was good at math and stuff like that, but music and being in band class was really compelling because it allowed me to be expressive. And that was something that in my life as a teenager felt really suppressed. I was like, oh, there's this big thing about me that no one knows about. I feel like I have to pass and share a secret and things like that. It just felt like I couldn't be myself. And that's probably just true for a lot of people in general as teenagers. And so I found myself in music, and that is why it was important to me. And to answer your question, so I got a scholarship on music. It's similar to athletics. It's kind of a high pressure, because you go and do the audition for the school, and that's going to determine the amount of your scholarship. And I'm like, God, why did I study for all these tests when this audition's all that's going to matter? Damn it. But it worked out. And University of Illinois was in state, and it's great that it was a large state school. I'm glad that I did. So I did a state school for undergrad, and then I went to Rice University in Houston which is a private school. So I'm glad I got to experience, a state school and also a private school and sort of see the differences between those two things. I just liked that the state school environment had people from a lot of different walks of life, a lot of students, 40,000 students at the time, probably even more now, and so you meet people from different countries, you meet people from all different kinds of socioeconomic backgrounds, studying all kinds of cool things. So it was a really good experience, and I'm glad that the music scholarship allowed me to experience that.
So I'm going to come back to the music in a second, but since you brought this up, this is what I found so striking about your book, and it's really in the introduction. I'm just going to read it. This is the first paragraph of your book. I came out as gay when I was 18, but I still wasn't ready to come out to myself about my relationship with money until much later in life. I found that mind-blowing because as a Gen X heterosexual white guy who cannot identify with the type of pressure that you went through and any young person who's gay goes through of just sort of like keeping that secret. I don't know what that's like. I imagine that's very difficult. So to have you spell out in the first paragraph of your book that in a certain way, money was tougher for you to deal with than your sexuality, I found that incredible. And I'm wondering what you think that says about money.
I think a lot of people would agree that they would rather share something else about themselves than share about their financial situation. Like there's all this shame really wrapped up in money. I don't want to speak on behalf of all queer people, but there's often like kind of like a shame aspect of that is sort of culturally enforced. The other big thing about sexuality, sexual orientation, and gender identity is it can be like a more covert aspect about yourself, like generally with race or with gender, like you cannot hide, right? It's just out there. Whereas there is sort of this optionality with sexual orientation, at least, that people get to kind of make a decision about that at some point, about how they're going to express themselves, and if they're going to express themselves in relation to who they actually are, and just being really honest with themselves in that way. And I found that the journey of being more connected to my money and the kind of like the face the music, I know, the rip the Band-Aid off, there are many different turns of phrase to describe that feeling. How it feels in my body is very similar to how the feeling of coming out felt in my body, where it was just this sort of, pretend it's not happening or get to it later or a number of other things. And finally it was like, okay, you know what? I'm tired of like dancing. It's like, it's more exhausting to dance around all of this,
right,
than it is to just confront it head on, admit to myself that this is how it is and this is how it's going to be going forward, and then to begin operating in alignment with that. And so I found that was the feeling that I wanted to land at the very beginning of the book, is like, this is the feeling that we're going to be kind of exploring and working in throughout this book. And it's a feeling that for most queer people, they are already familiar with. I was really passionate throughout this book of starting from a place of familiarity to help readers move into a place of unfamiliarity, right? So if it's a book for queer people about personal finance, like helping them associate with something that feels familiar and feels comfortable to them, and then using that as kind of a bridge or as analogy to move into some of these topics that might be new for some of them.
Well, and there is a similarity, and this is something that has come up on the show before in terms of, when you refer to sort of the way people present themselves, and you can present your sexuality one way if maybe you're hiding something else. And something that's come up plenty of times on this show is people or their parents or their partners presenting themselves financially in a way that if you actually dig into the finances, no, they're actually not as wealthy as they're presenting. And that's where they can get themselves into trouble. Let me go back to the music, though, because you get an advanced degree in music from Rice University. Is the plan, as you're going through all of this, is the plan you're going to be in a symphony orchestra somewhere?
Yeah, the general trajectory in classical music, if you go to school for classical music, you are really trying to win an audition in an orchestra as soon as possible. Like you're trying to get better, and you're getting a degree, and degrees help for other reasons, but orchestras have a very utilitarian job process. The auditions are behind a screen. You actually, to help mitigate gender discrimination, actually, they have you walk out on a strip of carpet. That way they can't see you walk out on stage, but then that way, if someone's wearing high heels, so if someone's wearing high heels and they're auditioning for tuba, that there can't be any kind of initial bias there. It's very interesting. It's very utilitarian. It's almost too utilitarian. You can't schmooze your way into anything. It's annoying because everything's behind a screen. So a 17-year-old can win a job in the New York Philharmonic. They just have to win the audition. You don't get the job, you win the job. And so, all of that is great, but it creates a very singular focus all throughout music school that I would compare to athletics, where there's almost not a firm encouragement to cut class or do the bare minimum in your other classes, but really they're trying to get practice as much as possible, get as good as possible, as fast as possible, because that's actually the thing that's going to maximize your chances at winning an orchestra job. An orchestra is it's a little boring. You're following a guy with a stick that doesn't make any sound, but it's salaried with benefits. It's unionized. There's tenure, similar to academia. So after you've been in there a few years and you get tenure, it's difficult to get out. And so it creates a stability. That career path creates stability in that field, which is just kind of rare in the arts in general, in anything outside of academia. So I was on this kind of one-track mind to pursue this audition. By the time I got to grad school, it was really kicking my butt because I was with these really, really good players. So they were already better than me. And then they were getting better faster than I was getting better. So I kind of the writing was kind of on the wall with that. And I also was just becoming this more well-rounded person. And so I didn't need music to prop up my entire identity in the way that I did several years prior. And so there's kind of this joke that some of the best athletes in the world and some of the best artists in the world, they're very broken people inside, actually, because then they kind of wield that. And that's their sort of motivator to be so freaking good at what they do. And so it's almost like as I healed myself, that intensity started to dilute and started to fall apart a little bit. And so by the end of grad school, I was like, I don't think I'm going to do this as a career.
The start of the year is the perfect time to look at your investments, and Ticker can help. With Ticker, you get access to the same kind of data the Wall Street pros use, but Ticker makes it simple enough for everyday investors like you and me. You just go to Ticker, type in the name of a public company, and boom, instantly you will see years of financials, analyst forecasts, insider trades, all in one place. And you can try it for free when you go to ticker.com/unplugged. It's like having your own personal Bloomberg terminal, but you're not paying $30,000 a year for it. Ticker gives you an easy way to get investing ideas and learn from the best, because one more way you can use it is to track big-name money managers to see what they're buying and selling. Save time and try it for free when you go to ticker.com/unplugged. That's TIKR.com/unplugged. It is the cleanest, easiest way to look deeper into any stock and see what the pros are doing. All right, let's get back to Nick. So when did you start to find money, and specifically advice around money, as a topic that interested you as a writer?
So throughout my 20s, I worked a bunch of odd jobs, like many college graduates, and I'd always enjoyed writing, started doing more freelance writing on the side, studied writing, was more of an autodidact with writing, just self-taught in that way. Shortly after I moved to Los Angeles, I just kind of felt like I had plateaued. And I wanted something different. I wanted something more editorial. And a peer of mine, who was an editor-in-chief at the time, the former editor-in-chief of Money magazine, he was at a new publication. He said, "Hey, we're looking for an editor who can do like small business and like gig economy and entrepreneurship and that kind of coverage, financial independence, retire early, creator economy, all the things that involved making more money." Like they really had it dialed in as a financial publication. Those standard verticals in financial media that are about managing money, best credit cards, best CDs, best, but mortgage rates, today's mortgage rates, et cetera. Those are pretty standard when you're starting a financial publication. But there was this whole separate category of stuff happening and how people were navigating money. And that's that they were going out and getting side hustles. And so all of that was very interesting. There was a lot of energy around that. So they hired me as the editor for that. And I think that was the time that really allowed me to appreciate the fundamentals of personal finance and what it can do for oneself from a stability perspective. Also, around that time, I had met the editor-in-chief of Out Magazine. I was doing finance writing, and he was like, "I'd love to do a finance column in Out Magazine. I'd love to give it a whirl and see what happens." And so we've been doing that for about 4 years. I love that column because it gets me researching about what are some of these deviations for queer people regarding personal finance. I joke that I'm usually sandwiched between two man spreads in the actual physical magazine, right? Because it's an entertainment magazine, right? And so you've got this, here's this celebrity, cover story, and then here's this other, very exciting fashion thing, and then here's me talking about inflation, like on page 36 and 37.
Eat your spinach.
Exactly.
Between these two desserts.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Here's Nick to serve you up a big bowl of financial spinach.
Yeah. Between these two, like very exciting, very flashy, extravagant stories, here's me talking about the student loan crisis, or how homeless youth, or just these other topics that we use the column for, and we kind of sort of traffic in different topics and talk about different things. But there's lots of great socioeconomic research about queer people that is just very underreported. Personal finance also can at times have a lot of purity culture to it, and that can feel kind of dissonant with queer culture. Queer culture is extravagance, opulence, fully live life now, YOLO, express yourself. You know what I mean? There's a lot of that, a lot of exuberance, and I don't want to dilute that, but I think there's like a both and conversation to be had, and to help queer people and young people in general feel safer about that both and conversation. We were just talking earlier about that kind of keeping up with the Joneses thing that happens with a lot of people, where it's like you don't want to be the wet blanket in your group of friends and be like, I can't really go on that trip. It's just not going to work in the budget. Didn't budget for it. So then you just do it anyway. And I think for queer people in kind of this quest for acceptance and belonging, we sometimes will prioritize that over our financial well-being. And that's part of why we see in some of these socioeconomic reports and data sets that we typically have more debt, we have less saved. On almost every barometer, we're just, we're a little bit further behind. And so I'm interested in exploring that and closing that gap and discovering like how we close that gap and how to deliver it in a way. Like I really believe in Inception, Chris. So it's like I need to plant the idea in their head.
Is it the movie?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Right. If I wag my finger and say, look at your spreadsheet, that's never going to work. I don't think with a lot of LGBTQ people and people in general. But if I can convince them that it was their idea to save money, then I think it's much more likely to stick.
If you're going to get inspiration from a movie of the last 25 years, Inception is about as good as it gets. Let's go to the speed round. What is a thing that you have bought that makes you happy?
I bought a nice record player recently.
Nice. Going vinyl.
Yeah, I love the vinyl. It's the middle finger to techno-feudalism, right? And don't have to keep paying for streaming for everything. But I also love it because I don't play the French horn anymore. I sold my instrument a few years ago. It's a way for me to kind of like connect with music and with classical music, also as a listener, and just also in like a slower, more intentional way. So to listen to the same record many times and develop a deep appreciation for that. And vinyl's gotten expensive, but classical music is very unpopular. So in the classical section, you can still get records for like $3 or $4. So I've been stacking them up, listening to all my oldies and goodies. So yeah.
Have you ever made a purchase you regret and sometimes you still think about it?
My first year in business, I got into this bad habit. It was really a series of purchases where I was purchasing these $1,000 and $2,000 courses or, flagship programs or things like that. And I hadn't really corrected my behavior of, after you buy the course, you have to do it and you have to implement it. I joke that I've been buying online courses for 7 years and not finishing them for 8. And you know what I mean? And it's like, I think I just fell into this dangling carrot behavior that is common generally, but also common in that space of, it's this one thing that's going to make your business skyrocket, or it's going to make everything, no, it's actually this other one thing, it's this other one thing, and to kind of like see through that and develop a little more business acumen around that. So my first year, I ended up way in the red, and it was my own fault.
What is something about money that you wish you knew earlier in life?
I didn't appreciate that at any given moment, money is moving in certain industries and not others. And so I just had this kind of impression that, playing in an orchestra was like the only way I was going to be able to have a salary, have health insurance or anything like that. And then I got a job in retail, and I already had health insurance with that job before I was done with college. And I was like, this is so much easier. I can just go home at the end of the shift. I don't have to practice. And so, I don't know. So just an appreciation of that. And also an appreciation. I am not an industry purist when it comes to writing and marketing. I'm a little bit more of I'm going to follow where the money is. And bring my skill set into an industry where the money is moving. And I think if more people did that rather than being beholden to, I studied this and it's for this industry, or, my professional, I have 5 years experience in this industry and therefore that's just the way it's got to be. I think if there's more fluidity around that, I probably would have grown my income faster and just had less, even more importantly, just had less chronic stress about all of that I had made the wrong decision or that I was in the wrong line of work, and that was just how it was going to be.
What's the last thing you splurged on, just for yourself, not for anybody else?
Outside of the record player, I did a spontaneous trip to New York City a couple months ago, and it, with the book, the last 5 or 6 times I've taken PTO, it was for something book related. I took a week of PTO to record the audiobook and sit in the uncomfortable chair and eat the Granny Smith apples and listen. As we were joking before we hit record.
Yes, the Granny Smith apples.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, yes, which are key
to the process.
And then to have to stop because the audio engineer is yelling at you because your stomach's growling. You know what I mean? You just can't hide anywhere. So not very fun uses of PTO. Which is fine. I signed up for this. But it was a spontaneous trip, and I'm trying to do more of that. Travel, on less than a few months' notice, and travel because I want to. And so that was something. It was a splurge. It was not the most cost leveraged trip that I've taken. The flights were probably cheaper had I gotten them a month sooner. But just to have the money and to be able to do it spontaneously. It was really great, and it was a fresh new feeling.
What's a charitable cause that you'd like to support?
I always like to support my local LGBTQ center. I like a local charity. It just they're the ones usually who are doing the most boots on the ground work for a community. You can see the difference in the community as a result.
Do you have a favorite movie or TV series that has money as a through line?
This is on YouTube, so anyone can go watch it. It's a National Geographic docuseries. It's called Trafficked. It's with Mariana Van Zeller. Fantastic, unbelievable journalist. And each episode is her investigating the supply chain of some form of trafficking. So it might be drug trafficking, it might be gun trafficking, it might be, it's just actually like doing the reportage, doing that investigative reporting of like tracing, like, here is this issue, here is this, this drug or this crime or something like that. And then in the episode, you don't know where in the world she's going to end up as she's tracking down the supply chain. There will be an episode where she will start in Los Angeles and she will end the episode in India. Or she will start in New York or in the Midwest, and then she will end up in Africa, and it's just, I just think it is like quintessential National Geographic. It's suspenseful, it's thrilling, it relates to money, but like through the lens of organized crime. And so if you want something a little darker, like, I know that's not, the usual white collar stuff, but it's the last thing I've watched where I've seen every episode of it. Like, I was like, oh my God, what other episodes of it? Because it's just so well done. And I think also in this AI age where so many things are, kind of machine generated from a content perspective, to see the kind of journalism that just simply cannot be replicated in that way. Like, it requires courage and it requires expertise and skill. And I don't know how she gets these interviews. She gets the interviews with like the cartel operators, where their voices are changed and they're wearing hoods. And I'm just, how did you get these people to talk about how they traffic the drugs? Like, how on earth are you doing this? It's so impressive to me. She's such a professional. It's such a good show. And it's on YouTube. What this new, I don't know, all these shows lately, last few years, been putting all their episodes up on YouTube. Maybe they just get some extra ad revenue or something. So if you are into that, it's dark, I won't lie, but it's the truth, and it's about how some of this stuff actually works.
The New York Times calls Nick Wolny's new book a fun, well-written primer on a subject that's usually a snooze. I could not agree more. Pick up a copy of Money Proud wherever you get your books. I'm Chris Hill. Thanks for listening. I'll see you next week.